Mr. Hari Sarvana Bhavan, who's the head of CIMET and PNR Cognizant Analytics at Cognizant Technology Solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, Hari is a senior business leader with 20+ years of work experience and has spent the last 13 years in the field of business analytics, both as a customer and a service provider. A seasoned business professional and a strong analytics evangelist, he has demonstrated exceptional capability in building businesses from concept stage to become top contributing and pervasive high growth business lines. Moving on to our panelists for today, I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Rajesh Dhar, Senior Director, Technology Services at HP. Mr. Dhar is currently the Senior Director for Technology Services Business for Enterprise Group at HP India. He is primarily responsible for the technology support and technology consulting services to the customers covering the entire HP product portfolios as well as solutions. The technology support services include new business acquisition in the areas of multi-vendor, data center care, and O&M services. We'd like to welcome you, sir. Thank you for joining us today. Mr. Kaushik Mitra, Senior Director, Head of Analytics, Personal Investing Business at Fidelity Investments. He heads the Retail Personal Investing Analytics team in Fidelity India, where he is responsible for leading a team of 100+ analytic professionals, building scale and developing new age analytic competencies. Kaushik is a seasoned marketing and analytics professional with 25+ years of work experience. We'd like to welcome you, sir. Thank you for joining us here. We also have with us Anshu Sharma, Senior Director, AIG Science. With over 18 years of experience in financial services, Anshu Sharma, Senior Director at AIG Science Bangalore, is responsible for developing and growing the data science and analytics of function for the group in India. In her previous role at Goldman Sachs, she had built a small but niche team of high caliber analytic professionals. We'd like to welcome her. Please join me giving her a round of applause for being here today. And I'd like to invite Mr. Pankaj Rai, who's the Director of Dell Global Analytics. He has been with Dell for 10 years and has been with DGA for over 7 years, prior to which he was working with the India President's Office and managed all strategic and corporate planning related initiatives of Dell in India. Please join me welcoming our panelists here with a huge round of applause, and I'll hand it over to our chair, Mr. Hari. Sir, please take over. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes.
So the first thing that the panel told me was, when we go up there on the stage, Hari, as a moderator, you need to make sure that everybody there is awake and ask us the right questions, and they will give the right answers. Okay? So I'm going to count on you to make sure that you ask the right questions. The first part of today, we really heard a lot about what analytics can do, what are the good things about analytics, how there is a disruption, there is invention, innovation that's happening in the industry using analytics. However, there's another side to it as well, right? All of us as service providers, some of us as clients, also know that there are issues around adopting analytics within our own organizations. And this session is really dedicated towards that, which is understanding from a service standpoint, from a service provider standpoint, and a client standpoint, do we as professionals actually see any challenges in adoption of analytics? And we obviously have a fantastic panel which is going to give us some thoughts, some views, and we will open it up for questions once they are through with their viewpoints. Yeah. So let me just set the ball rolling to my panel, and I'll start from the lady here. I'll show. One of the things that we typically hear is that whilst analytics is good, it can do great things. There is a cultural or a mindset issue around analytics. Is that something that you would subscribe to? Do you think that analytics is today a pervasive function in organizations, or do you think otherwise?
Pervasive, yes, but pervasive also because of, I think it's the bandwagon everybody wants to hop into. So I'm not sure if that's the right mindset to tackle it, but it is what it is. I think, what the IT industry went through 10, 15, 20 years back when, everybody wanted to be a software engineer. So that's happening, at least that's what I perceive that's happening with analytics, that, whether you want it or not, if I'm the CEO of the company, I want it on my, on my presentation when I make it to the board, whether I'm leveraging it in the right earnest or not. If I'm an engineer looking for a job, or, coming out of grad school, then I want it on my resume, because, it multiplies my prospects of getting a job, and likewise. So yes, to your question on culture, pervasive, yes, but is it in the right context and in the right set? That's questionable.
Sure. Pankaj, just to build on that, when you deliver to your end clients, do you think that business has a view on what they need? And is that an impediment in terms of adopting analytics within an organization?
So, given that I was a Six Sigma black belt guy once in GE, so I have a very Six Sigma type of a bias. So I'll share with you what I think about analytics. Six Sigma also was a big thing in those early days, and it was also a change management exercise. And I started to believe that everything is really a process which needs to be improved, and which is what really Six Sigma was all about. And when I came into the analytics world, I started to look at the A of analytics as the D make, the middle A. And I said, end of the day, we are all trying to do process improvement. So I think, the issue really is in the way it is, engaged with the business. So just like the Six Sigma function was, created in a certain way in organizations, and it had a challenge because you had many outsiders who felt they had a way to do things. Similarly, in the analytics world, if you get a bunch of data scientists in a room and say, you know what, now you guys need to deliver analytics, and they don't, gel with the other parts of the business. So my own view is that, businesses have always focused on continuous improvement and analytics without necessarily realizing it, because that's the only way to grow and improve your business. I think the way it is configured and, put inside the organization creates challenges. So my experience is that if you get business guys more involved, whether it is Six Sigma, analytics, whatever, and create a nice way of engaging, I think it works very well. Similarly, I think if you're a service provider, if you have a business guy talking a business language and everything else is sort of a, under the hood, I think that works pretty well in my opinion.
Sure. And Kaushik, would you think that that's something that's happening today? Is it doable where you really get your business involved? Because that's obviously your biggest impediment to make this function a successful function.
Absolutely. So I would say it's happening in bits and pieces. So for some of the companies, like if you think about Amazons of the world, who have evolved from analytics up, where analytics is in the core DNA, they have built recommendation engines, etc., around the foundation of analytics. So that's very staple diet for them. Now for some of the new age companies or evolving companies who are now trying to think about analytics, that becomes a challenge, because there are two types of challenges we see. One is on the front line, people are saying, hey, you are giving me some predictive and prescriptive what kind of models and churning out leads. What's the guarantee that I will hit my numbers at the end of the day? So you are replacing gut by some of the modeling. So there's distrust, and that causes some friction. On the top end, what I've seen is there are people who would say, hey, analytics is a pet project, I will do something on the side, but the problems are not defined. So what that results in is you come up with some esoteric findings, novel, insightful, and sometimes you hear the word interesting, which I'm very cautious about and nervous about nowadays whenever I hear the word interesting. And that means that it's good, but it is not actionable. So if that happens, then it gets into the back burner and nothing happens out of that. So those are the scenarios where we need to be safeguarded against, and we need to have a CEO or CMO on your side, a believer of that, be into the trenches with you before you go in and do some of those pet projects or run a pilot, etc. So I think those are some of the challenges we see.
Thanks. Rajesh, so do you think that if an organization had a top-down approach, this probably will become a science that's used much more than what it is today?
Actually, you couldn't have asked me a better question than this. Let me start with I meet a lot of customers, and I have met many customers who are saying that they don't see value of analytics. But what business guys do ask is, what is it that you bring to the table? So if I have a business problem and I want to make a decision in next 1 hour, and analytics team is telling me in next 45 days, we're going to create this model and give you the answer, it doesn't make sense. But I think my sense is, if you go back a few years, people used to talk about data warehousing and say in 45 days they can tell you what customer bought from you. Today, I believe technologies are available. Platforms are available, tools are available for you to actually give an insight in minutes. So the acceptability you would see improving. So I would say with the technology now maturing, I think there is much better acceptability at the business level. Second is, you link analytics to change management within your organization. And you said how can you pull, when it comes from top down. 2 years back, the entire sales management in HP moved to Salesforce.com. And the challenge was, forecasting was a big challenge on numbers because everyone used to work on Excel sheets. So I had a number which was different from my boss's number and all the way will it go to MEG. It would have a totally convoluted view of the data which was sales data. But they drove it top down. So we said we will not do any review other than the Salesforce.com. As he said, a lot of sales guys work on gut basis. They don't like this accountability. You have to key in a lot of data, where you went, what calls you took. Today, same sales guys actually are able to look at an account, look at the account profitability, look at what partners are playing, what has been the history of that account, and suddenly you run a lot of analytics around programs you want to run for those segments. You are realizing that there are market segments where we've not done business. So, to the point you said, if you link first analytics, the way it is today available, I don't think there's a challenge in making palatable for business guys. Two, if you link it to the change management process and have the sponsorship at the highest level, it is a science and it's been working, and I've seen it for the last 2 years in our sales management.
Sure, right.
I think what Rajesh mentioned touches upon to the culture question that you asked as well,
absolutely.
right? And what Kaushik said as well also. So, one example he was citing that, you're just doing it as a pet project and there is no there's no actionable stuff coming out of it. So then it just becomes, something that, because the other teams are doing, or, my competitor is doing, I need to do. But, here is also an example of where it is truly pervasive and it has made a difference.
Right.
Like I say, the art behind the science is something that organizations need.
And to Anshu's point about pervasiveness, there is another small anecdote which I have seen, which I think ties in with what you are saying. With companies who are making 30% margin, like in IT services, and you go to their CEOs and say, hey, here is a cool tool which will do visualization, this, that. They said, can you increase my profit from 30 to 31%? And if the answer is no, then here's the door. But if you go and talk and have the same discussion with, I was at discussions with Kroger or CVS, where the margins are razor thin. There they would be more willing to accept and adopt some of these things and try, because 1% margin difference makes a huge difference. So there I think you will get a getter, and that's where you see the more of the retail financial services where the biggest adoption of analytics have happened in the last few years.
So I just want to move on. So, the next pertinent topic which impacts adoption in my mind is data. Everybody talks about volume of data, velocity of data, there's data available from social fields, etc. But as each one of you sits on the other side as a practitioner, do you really believe, we are in a position to actually take all that data, mine it the way that end users or business would want to look at it? And is that today becoming a limitation? Because every time you do something, there's another source of data coming in somewhere, the moment of truth is completely different, right?
Yeah.
So what would be the panel's views on that? I'm sure you can start with that.
Sure. So, I'm just thinking, because as you were saying, I was just evaluating the different data sets that we deal with, and absolutely right? So, what do you take and what do you discount? I think that's that's one of the key challenges in how successful your analytics venture would be or not be. Because the data is huge, as you said, the kinds of data are huge, the types of data are huge. Some of this, how do you, if there is somebody who's been in the business for say 25, 30 years, how do you take that data point, the gut that, Kaushik mentioned, how do you quantify that, how do you enter that as a data element as well? So are we getting the right parameters into the models and things like that? So it's not just the volume and the size. I mean, there are enough tools available to manage all of that. But it's the different quality of data or different variety of data and the different elements of data and what do you take and what do you discount. I think that's the
Sure.
I would absolutely agree, and that that could be a big differentiator between your success and what can you gauge out of it.
I think the other trend that I'm observing is that all of this is also making the analyst sometimes lazy or redundant.
Sure.
So compute and storage, the costs are coming down so drastically that you can tomorrow just put all the data somewhere and a machine learning model will figure out what's going on. So in a way, some of those are interesting and for some people disturbing trends, saying, okay, what will I do if there are models which will do all of those things? So I think there's this worry that, when we, talk to our analysts in our team saying this is going to happen, so people worry just like the manufacturing era, will some of these low-end jobs get, automated and eliminated? And, my favorite, analogy there is of manufacturing when you had manual labor and then CNC machines came in and one guy was managing 10 machines. So maybe a guy who's pulling SQL queries and stuff like that will be like that manual labor 10 years down the line will have no job because the machine learning model is going to do all of those things and you can't sort of move around. So I think those are some interesting other labor market trends also that need to be kept in mind and how people think about those.
Yeah, on the data front, it's kind of interesting because the things that I observe, the trends I observe is there is so much data, and if you think about a step back and see how the data collection and gathering has happened, the analytics or the gathering part of that has been mainly been done from the technology angle. And so we have seen data being captured as screenshots, whereas it should be in tables and tabular fashion. So when the data analytics or data scientists came in and say, oh my God, I have to spend 80% of this time crapping the data, make it quality, and then move on and apply some of the school machine learnings that I was taught in the programs. So that creates a huge challenge. So we, some of the companies are now putting together data governance, data quality type of programs to make sure that the quality of data and are right in the first place. And the second thing that is happening is, the business and technology are getting very integrated. So the requirements from the business are getting then translated, whether it is tag management, whether it is the data structure in Hadoop or Clickstream, whatever you are capturing, that requirements are now being fed to technology and then it is being captured. Previously, that was not the case. So I think that's another thing that I'm observing.
See, keep the data part, which is you have data coming from multiple sources and it is only going to grow. And I did some, I'm not a technical guy, so I did some Wikipedia for this panel. And it said the number of networked devices on the internet, I think, surpassed the human population in 2011. So you have now more network devices which are churning data. There are going to be 5 billion sensors on the industrial internet, companies like GE, some of these locomotive companies which are going to put in. And these sensors are going to keep, and then if I go by what our Prime Minister says about 100 smart cities, add some few over billion sensors, and then you have smartphones, and we had a very interesting discussion on whether Android is better or Apple's better. So you have a lot of data. It's just coming in different formats, it's video, whether it's audio, and I believe, and I think I saw some of the presentations which were presented earlier. It spoke about the various technologies which are available to handle different types of data. Then you add one more element to it and says, more the data you have, the better your decision making or predictive analysis or whatever you're getting out of it. So hence, the more the better. And then we have this element which he said that cost of storage, cost of technology is
Coming down.
So now suddenly this is given. You have a lot of data, different formats, and you can store, you can create data lakes. Is that the right term? Am I right? And I was reading and I realized that what would differentiate a company's effectiveness on analytics is a lot about, they talk about data scientists, am I right? And we had a different view on that. But I believe data scientists are going to play a big role in looking at your business context, in what business you are in, what is impacting you, and what data is relevant. You can actually get lost in the data if you do not know what data to look at.
Sure.
So I learned hot data, cold data, and then you archive data. But I believe that what will differentiate analytics effectiveness would lot to do with what data you actually need. which will make sense for you, for your business goals, and then the use cases which you create. So I think the role of these data scientists. So then I also thought, so who is this data scientist? You know, what should be the attributes, and how do you know whether he's a good data scientist? So it says there are some 5 or 6 qualities you need to have in a data scientist. It talks about you should know coding, stroke hacker. Look at how they're saying, you know. So you should know where to look for data. You should have a very scientific mind. So you challenge, you are data driven, but you also impatient. You also need to be an advisor or trusted advisor, because you also will start interacting with business leaders, because you're selling the use cases. You also need to understand statistical theories and the tools. And you also need to have domain understanding in the business you are being parked. Now, this is the attributes they are saying a data scientist should have. Now, honestly, I don't know where you find these people, whether there are many, but in my mind, I think a business, retail, let's say a Flipkart versus Snapdeal, a lot of differentiations would be around what data you're actually looking at and what is going to make an impact to your business. So I would believe those areas will become very critical, not the data handling, because I think technologies are available today.
Yeah, but I think if I can just add to that, you know, not in the same technical terms as Rajesh put it, I didn't do that much of homework. I'm just kidding. But you know, just to emphasize the point that some of the challenge exists that, you know, we don't do data governance, the data management, data curation as day one exercise. We do it as an afterthought, and that's why it becomes more and more challenging. If I can just, you know, I think this example, if I can give an analogy with all our day-to-day lives, that 20 years back when there were no digital cameras, when there were this roll of 36 given to us to shoot, we would be very, very careful about what we frame into it. And if we had to, you know, print pictures and frame it on a wall, you would really be choosing which one out of 36 or 2 out of 36. Today there are 50,000, I don't know, look back your 10-year history, 15 years history, there'll be over a lakh pictures. But if the job is to pick the 10 most important pictures of your life, you know, capturing the life events, that can go on a, you know, frame in the wall. How you need the data governance there, right? Otherwise, you know, whether it's your phone, whether it's someone else's phone, whether it's WhatsApp, you know, people are just clicking. So the data governance is not really an afterthought. It has to be day one, day zero rather.
Sure. So true. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, very, very pertinent and relevant points. And I want to catch up on what you spoke about data scientists. And I have my own views, but would like to take the panel views. So, you know, we have a new theory called data science, and data scientists probably in the last, I would say, about 2 years, or maybe less than 2 years. Do you think that that's really fueling adoption of analytics, or do you think it's confusing customers? And when I say consumers, your end clients, right? What would be the view of the panel?
So my own view is that we don't really need too many data scientists. So we have a fairly large team of analytics professionals in our company. I think 70% of those people are probably, I would say, involved in doing reporting-oriented work, while they make some sense out of it and insight out of it, but I think that is the amount of time you are spending. So I think the big value is in automating that stuff so that people's times can be freed up, but today I don't think we have the technology, the wherewithal and many of those things to happen. I think data scientists, at least in our world, I would believe maybe, you know, we probably need, you know, 2% out of 400 people, for example, you know, something like that. So I don't think we need that level of sophistication today. There's so much of low-hanging fruit lying down that, you know, we have to just, if we can do that well, I think we have far more value. I think the other problem with that sophisticated analysis is that, you know, some of those high-end models, also it's hard for the businesses to understand and appreciate unless the low-hanging stuff has been picked up. Correct. So I would feel that you kind of have to go from bottom to top, and I think some amount of hype is also there because this science has become very fashionable. You know, every CIO, every analyst would like to call themselves a data scientist. If you haven't taken the machine learning course of Andrew Ang on a MOOC, then maybe you are left out when your peer group and things like that. You know, so those are the kind of hype which are getting created in multiple levels. I doubt whether these are really impactful. So I always look at saying, where is the big business impact? Look at lean analytics versus, you know, inside out. Because we have data, we will do something.
Sure.
Absolutely. The same thing, you know, that it needs to be across the spectrum. Yes. Just having, you know, 80% of, you know, very senior data science professionals on your team does not really guarantee you success. Yes. It has to be like Pankaj said, there has to be, you know, there are definitely a lot of low-hanging fruits. So, you know, again, you know, if I can give you an example, to me it sounded like you know, the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, yes, but it also has to start from your home. Yeah. So it can't just be that, you know, just get every, you know, big wig in the city and then just get this moving. But so you need the entire spectrum to, you know, clear this out. And yes.
Yeah, I think spot on. I mean, the thing that I see, you know, nowadays, if you think about analytics, this whole hoopla about big data. I mean, probably 2 to 5% of the people are going to use and big data and are going to be needed. And before you do that, you need the relevant use cases. I mean, so oftentimes, you know, companies hire big data scientists without knowing what use cases they are going to tackle. And most of the problems, and here is the disconnect that happens. Most of the problems are very, like Pankaj was stating, you know, very, you know, somewhat basic to medium level problems which you can solve with the analytics of today. And then you hire these big data scientists from, you know, the big known institutions, and the work that you are giving them are not what they expect. And this creates dissatisfaction and discontent, and you will see a high churn in the industry. So that's number one. The other thing we are seeing is, if you think about analytics, it's big data science is one, but we are not getting people who are having a lot of domain knowledge. You know, that's something, you know, domain knowledge, statistics, and, you know, and the data scientist coding. 3 skills in one person I have not seen. You know, if you guys know anyone, please send it our way. We are ready to hire. So we are often, you know, optimizing one versus the other, and then have people learn those skills internally. But I think those are the challenges, especially and I think I was in the session in the morning, somebody was talking about, you know, business impact and storytelling. It's, you know, as you move up the chain and, you know, those aspects of storytelling, connecting the dots to the business, nobody cares about the mumbo jumbo of support vector machine or random forest, etc. They want to know, how can I use it to become more effective? Or how can I increase my productivity, increase my revenue, etc. I mean, those machine learning stuff will all happen in the back end. And they will probably become automated in the future. I think that's the way I think it's going to go.
So, you know, so it's 3 versus 1, so I stand corrected. But I just wanted to make one point. You know, I was, you know, we were discussing about the culture and the ROI. So a lot of people today, when they look at analytics, is you have a business case. To deliver that business case, this is the IT investment, and this is what you get in return. And if it makes sense, let's go ahead. And that's been the traditional approach we are seeing in the market. But just move away and say, when you invest in R&D, so you work on 10, 12, 13, 15 projects, all right? And then out of those 15 or 18 projects, you have 2 blockbusters and 16 failures. So I think in the analytics context, when I said data scientist, you also have to look at very clear ROI, which is on the projects which are tactical, you know, which is what we traditionally do. Yep. Which is you look at ROI, it makes sense, CFO says go ahead, and then you have this R&D view. And let me give you an example. I was reading about LinkedIn. They have this feature called People You May Know.
Yep.
That is a good example of looking at some 20, 30 projects they would have embarked on, and then one clicked, and that brought 30% traffic increment on their.
Correct.
Now, when they would have started, I don't think they had a very watertight case on ROI. So I you know, and that's where the data scientist context comes. And I have in my career of whatever 12 months in HP for services, met only one guy. We don't have many. But when you talk to them, you realize, you know, they're not looking at, the reason is, traditional analytics, operational data store, you're looking at data what is within. Now there is a lot of data which is outside, and you don't know which part of the data is going to have an impact. And that science is very hazy today. You don't know out of those 10 elements what is going to impact you. So what my understanding of data scientists is that while you do the tactical stuff, you're also looking at opportunities which are not visible today, could evolve over a period of time on new products, new attitude, new cultures, not cultures, new habits, and that will trigger, and those correlations, in my mind, I think it's a science, and it's a very specialized science, and you know, every organization which has a strategy needs to have 1 or 2 very good, solid data scientists. Whether you would have those or not, But if you go to Microsoft, Google, Facebook, you will have all these guys. And they do some very cutting edge work for them in areas which are not visible today, have no ROIs, and they're treating it like as an R&D factory. You do use cases, look at unknown elements which don't make sense, figure out a pattern, maybe connect.
Sure, yeah. No, that makes sense. And carrying on from not just data science, but even from a resource standpoint, a skill set standpoint, do you guys think that that's an impediment today as we look at the adoption of analytics? I mean, because my career, I've seen that as one of the challenges that clients face, because you probably change people, you don't have people with long-term tenures in an organization, so the domain knowledge doesn't come in and stuff like that. How do you think that piece is going to pan out when you're already putting a complexity of, it's another layer called data science, which also is a niche skill set?
So I think it is a challenge. I think all of us here, since morning we've been discussing in various, different groups and so on, that hiring for data science, talent availability, not just the availability, but I think, this amalgamation of, the right domain knowledge, the right mindset, the right, pervasiveness, and the right intent why one is data scientist or a data analyst, for instance, absolutely. So they're very, very far and few, and I'm sure there are institutes that are booming and developing. So great, but it's still in nascency. And like I said earlier on, a lot of people are there, because they want to be on that bandwagon. But truly over time, people who really are genuinely interested and also with an analytical mindset is important. The other challenge we face is also how do you evaluate? I mean, it's easier for a software engineer to get evaluated or a programmer to get evaluated, right? I mean, there are questionnaires, there are other behavioral Q&A that you do with them and so on. But how do you assess when you're hiring for data analysts? How do you kind of assess whether he's the right fit and the right skill set also? So those are challenges as well.
Sure. Okay.
I think in our case, what I have seen, I think hiring is never a challenge. We have lots of people, and the nature of work that we do, we get as many people as we want. I think retaining is a challenge, and that is a challenge which, like any industry, when it's growing, everyone who gets 1 year of experience starts to become very, very an expert in that field, so to say. And either they expect a very quick jump inside, or there's someone outside with loads of money from the VC industry saying, I can double your salary and I think you will be valuable just because you worked for this XYZ company. So I think the challenge is that people don't spend too much time gaining experience, and someone else who's more desperate than us will pick them up, and I think we kind of keep getting in that rut. So I think attrition is a challenge, hiring is not a challenge, because I think we have lots of smart people in this country, and it's sort of not so hard to get those guys, and the nature of work we do is not rocket science. I think we can get them.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so given that there is a paucity of talent, do you think that upskilling themselves on different skill sets is also a concern for them?
I actually think that people are not interested in upskilling, because what I see is that with the same level of skill, they're able to increase their salaries and roam around in the market with no extra knowledge. And that happens in any industry. I think the BPO industry, the IT industry, every industry has that. So whenever demand outstrips supply, people become lazy. You don't have to do anything. Your profile is there on LinkedIn. Some fellow who's desperate will look at it saying, Dell, data analytics, let me hire them, or Mu Sigma decision scientist, let me hire them, or whatever that is.
Right. But again, like you said, that this industry is on the upswing, right? So, very soon it will also become commoditized.
Yeah.
Just the way the IT industry has now.
Absolutely. My view has been that, we are somewhat short-sighted in how we and where we go to for looking for those people. So our traditional bias is when you look for decision scientists or data scientists, where do we go? The top IITs of the country, or the top IIMs, or some of the statistical like Madras School of Economics or Delhi School of Economics, we go there. But if we are hiring for, because the number of people that we can get from those are far and few between, as you're saying. But what some of the companies outside they have started doing is looking at people who can really pick those up. Like Google has started hiring musicians for data science discipline, because they have found out there is a pattern of good musicians and good data scientists have a lot of in common. So if they can be groomed in data science, they can be great in the future. So we need to look at some of the unconventional things as opposed to just going for the same few institutes, because there are only few and far between, and then when I start hiring, what I find is people who claim to be data scientists or have stuff on the CV, if you start talking 10 minutes into the conversation, you would probably find out that they know nothing about it. So there are a lot of people like this who claim to be data scientists or decision scientists, but really when you start talking about that, the depth is not there. So instead of going and hiring for that, why don't I hire a bright guy who might not have a completely orthogonal background, and then train him to do something in the future. So that's where I think we need to look in the future.
Sure. So, my view, actually, I agree, because there is a supply gap, which is what the demand is. So, and as she said rightly, as the industry matures, you will. I think what we also have to do is there's also this whole context of industry actually giving feedback to institutes. What happened, when the IT wave started, and then there's a lot of collaboration between education institutes and industry in terms of what they are looking at. I was listening into a panel we had in Goa some time back, and it's the fact that you not only, when I was talking about this, what skills you need, you also, I think I am, or one of the institutes have started a program on analytics. So they not only teach you about the tools and the technology, they also have a legal module in that, because now you're suddenly working with a lot of data, which is not yours, but someone else's.
Exactly.
And there are data privacy issues.
Exactly.
So, it is, a lot of people download images from Google, and there are a lot of ad agencies started using those images, and then they realize that you can't.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of education which is needed. So my sense is, I think if you get these three areas covered, and there are a lot of institutes today, IIMs, IITs, a lot of specialized institutes which are now having these analytics courses. I think if they pepper it with a little bit of legal module, a little bit of technology module. So that's why I said a little bit of industry involvement in shaping those courses, that will help.
Sure.
I think I'll give you another example which is very unique to Dell. So Dell has a huge call center population. That's how we grew in India. So given you have 10,000 people, over time we started to hire from the call center world. And this appears very odd, saying how can you have a call center guy work in analytics? But in a call center also there are operational people who are planning for the call center, forecasting, and then people who become data analysts. But usually this is the crowd which was from sort of no-name engineering colleges who probably never got a job in those days, and call center was the best job. But my own belief is in any population of 10,000, the top 100, which is 1%, you can always find some cream. So we actually started hiring from within, saying, we'll put you through a test. There were some people who had actually gone out and taken courses. So today, half our team actually grew up inside of call centers. The benefit of that is they're hungry, they want to learn, they believe they're in a good place. They know Dell very well, they've spoken to Dell customers, they understand, they relate to the culture. So I have found that to be a very, very useful thing for Dell. We were just lucky. I think in most of our peer industry group, when I talk to them, the analytics team, even in a large corporate, seems to be an isolated incubator, sitting in an R&D room, not believing that they can exchange talent with each other. And it could be due to various different reasons how the organization culture is. But I think if you can connect it to a larger mass, and I would say that the IT industry is going to go through a big bloodbath. I don't think most of those people will survive the next 10 years. So maybe there's an opportunity for folks, just like the hotel industry folks came to the call centers, maybe the IT services industry can come to the analytics, and there could be some smart, cool kids over there who can be got over. So I think we need to look creatively and bring people from other places who might have good skills and the hunger to sort of do something new.
And just adding to that, but do you think that today, service providers and clients have that view, and let me just coin a word like analytics insight, right? Which means that you're really getting into the process and you're really making sure either the process is becoming better or more efficient or more effective, which is what the business wants, right? But do you really think that people are in that way, they're thinking that way, both from a client as well as a service provider standpoint, or are we far away from it?
So like I said, analytics is seen still as an inside-out thing. I always think, someone asking Michael Dell, what do you think about big data? I said, I just care about big results. If you get it through big data, that's fine, but if you get it otherwise, that's fine. So I think, that sort of summarizes, which many other panelists have said, that's what everyone cares about. They don't care where it came from.
Correct.
So I think if you get process-oriented people to teach them analytics versus the analytics people to teach process, which is harder. So I think there are a lot of people sitting. So we hire from, Arvind brands or any Nokia sales, whatever. So you are a guy who knows business and you have keen to learn, analytics. we would love to have you and allow you to do that. So I think growing backward is easier because you are still connecting to the customer and doing some smart thing anyway to continue to engage them, and then sort of grow your legs and other organs to sort of be more deep in that. So I think that might be a way to look at that industry versus going after actually real data science talent who will be disconnected to the reality.
Would you agree with that?
I think the mindset, yeah, absolutely agree with Pankaj. And I also believe that the mindset is important. The tools and techniques can be taught, but having an analytics mindset, but somebody who's already thinking of the actionable insights or the results, and then how to get there. Yes, that can be trained and taught and so on.
Sure.
Yeah, and nowadays, as we go into the self-learning modes like Coursera, Udacity, and the world, the learning has become much more easier. It's asynchronous. So if you think about, there are 9 or 10 different courses that we have come up with, and say if people can get trained on that, we can consider them as part of the data science team. So we are looking at, like Pankaj is saying, internally, people who knows the processes, knows our business, because that's the last mile, which is hardest to get through. Teaching people on R or some of the Hadoop, I think people in India are pretty capable to pick that up even at a later stage. But that business knowledge, domain knowledge, how to, because it's not what I've seen in data scientists, they think about the technology and then they think about the business. Rather than think about the business first and then the technology, you have to solve that.
Sure.
Yeah, unless you have that lens, it becomes harder.
Sure. Yeah, and as we move on, this is probably the final piece in the panel discussion. From an industry standpoint, do you really believe that there's too much of fragmentation that we have? So let me take an analogy. Let's take consulting. You have the big 4. If you look at IT, you have the top 3 domestic organizations. Similarly, globally, you have 2 or 3 organizations. If you come to analytics, you probably have 50, 100, 150. So you don't really have benchmarks across across the industry. Everybody seems to do things in their own way. Everybody is really a small fish in a pond. Do you think that's also some sort of an impediment when you're looking at adoption of analytics across the board? Because everybody wants to do it very differently.
I won't subscribe to the fact that it's an impediment. I think the nature of the work of analytics is such that it can't be commoditized, or it should not be commoditized. Rather, it should not be that you're just a Java shop and you're just producing different types of flavors of Java code and so on. So it's not that. To my viewpoint on that is that it's not. So I don't think that's an impediment. That it is just if we need to have a big 4 for analytics, or we need to have a 100,000 people shop for analytics alone and so on. Because every business is different. The way people think of problem solving, fundamental is problem solving to analytics. So that's different. How I budget may be very different than someone else's and so on. So I would not think that it's an imperative. But
I think given that it's a new field, I think it's only natural that a lot of people should, and I welcome trying out multiple things. I think over time we'll also figure out what works, what doesn't, because right now it's very premature to judge which is the way to actually even think about analytics. So we all have our own notions of thinking about it, but I don't know what that is. So like Manshu said, I think maybe it's a consulting one level down is what if analytics is. Then maybe there can be many different approaches to solving the same problem. And if people come from many different ways of doing it, so be it, because there's so much a plethora of technology, techniques, all of that. So I think I actually welcome that diversity here. And I don't know whether eventually there'll be a very few 3 or 4 shops which will dominate just like they do consulting or IT services. My suspicion is, given the horizontal and vertical diversity in the industry, I think there'll be many more fragmented type of shops, although I'm sure there will be big companies will be there, but far more smaller ones also.
Okay. I think the types of problem lends to different types of solutions. Since what I have seen is people have come up with point solutions. So case in point, fraud detection or claims processing or marketing lead generation. They all require different types of tools and techniques. Not so much tools, but techniques to get to the solution that you are looking at. So it's not like you provide a Java solution script and then you can drive applications. The applications are all different. So the secret sauce that goes behind it are all different. Right. So I don't feel, it's not going to be as commoditized in the way IT has been in the past, because it requires a lot of knowledge, and which is going to differentiate between the typical IT industry, the commoditization of IT versus where I see the analytics going in the future.
Sure. Rajesh?
So, lots been talked about. My sense is, I think it is the state at the way the industry is today. And we should actually encourage people, because there's a lot of innovation which happens, and a lot of point solutions, point problems get addressed. My own view is it will get consolidated. And what you will see is a horizontal layer, which is technology, which I think wouldn't matter whether it is banking or telecom or aviation or travel or XYZ. And then you will have a domain layer. And hence your analytics will get sliced along the domains. So you'll have banking, finance, telecom, horizontal technology, and then my sense is you will see Big Four or large companies like HP actually picking up companies to complete the portfolio.
Sure.
It is how hospital management system. People had for a solution for beds, how you manage beds, or a solution for pharmacy. And then when a lot of these problems got solved, then somebody came and said, okay, I have a hospital management solution for you. It's end to end. So my sense is a lot of time will be spent on the domains, because if platforms become common between two competitors, then what is it that differentiates you?
Sure.
Is that insight, and that's why I come back to the same point which I talked about data scientists. That is going to be the differentiator between two banks, what data they actually look at, and what becomes meaningful for them, and as a differentiator. So I would leave consolidation, but along the lines of verticals.
Sure.
But I think it will also depend on the penetration of analytics into our day-to-day lives. Yeah. So if I'm a Kirana store, I would be more than happy to use analytics to see what should I stock, what is the demographics of my. Right now I do it in my head. That these are all new.
Grofers is already doing it for you.
Sorry.
Grofers is started.
Grofers, yeah. No, but that's for the. Agree. But what I'm saying is that if I'm just a local store catering to in Kormangla, for instance, hugely populated by youngsters who live, and so what should I really stock for them in my store? If I can get to that level of analytics, where the end user is not just corporations who are consuming analytics, but end users like me, that will be. So then that will completely change the whole dynamics.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know that there's one bell which has gone out, and we need to give some time for Q&A. But to summarize, I think whilst there are challenges, everybody here, at least in the panel, feels that as we mature as an industry, we should be able to overcome those challenges. Challenges will exist, and that's true for any industry that's growing at a pace at which analytics has been growing in the last decade or so. Yeah. What we'll do is we'll open the forum for questions. You can ask questions from any of the panel members or myself.
Hi, my name is Samyak. 15 years back, probably we would have been having the same conversation, same topic, challenges in analytics adoption. Probably the challenges would have been more on the demand side, like how do I convince, and this like analytics as a service, right? How do I convince my customer, prove them that this is going to be useful for you, and so on and so forth, right? The challenges which we are hearing today is more on the supply side. How do I get resources, etc., etc. Are there any learnings? We have solved that demand problem. And that's why analytics is a big buzzword right now. Are there any learnings through which we solve those demand side problems and challenges, which we can leverage in solving the supply side challenges as well? Your views.
So my own view is that a big part of the demand side challenges were solved because the market took on to the internet, and I think internet was born with data. Google doesn't have to tell anyone that they are an analytics company, they have to be an analytics company. So my own view is that just the proliferation of the internet has driven a lot of offline people to believe that there is no way they can do that. I mean, Kishore Biyani has been sitting around while the Bansals have created a business bigger than his. And you look around at the world, there's the Airbnb is the biggest hotel company, and Uber is the biggest taxi company, and they've all come in the last 10 years. So I think just the whole internet platform technology has forced the entire industry who were even in the offline world. I mean, even shipping line like Maersk is now setting up an analytics center. I mean, why should they? So my belief is, I think internet has just forced everyone else to take notice and believe that this has to be looked at, and we have to acknowledge it.
And I think whether you are a, like I said, whether you are a very, very small business, just a shop in, some obscure location, or a large company like Maersk, or even a Shell, everybody has realized that they need analytics. I think they have been inherently using it, but it's just that it's coming out in a much more formal way in the forefront.
Yeah,
I don't think so. My own view is that this demand-supply balance of the talent side will just it will just take time to solve, because on the demand side, people will go crazy with any new industry, and you can't stop that. Your CIO will want to have 50 design scientists being hired, whether you think whether it's required or not, right? And things like that. So I think some of those, like I said, the market is the best teacher. I think we can have all of those learnings, but there'll be a lot of people trying to do different things. So my own way, it's such a question of time.
Hi, my name is Shri. I had a question on the big data. So I completely agree around your point on the big data. The fact that the adoption of big data itself needs to be treated with some sort of caution in terms of what are the incremental results that we get from adoption of big data. Do you think the adoption, the pace at which big data can be adopted meaningfully will also depend on the industry? And by that I mean, for example, something like e-commerce versus banking. So e-commerce is a core, the business model itself is core digital, right? Whereas banking is still, most of the business is at a core it's still not digital. Also banking is regulated. So the pace at which you can adopt big data in analytics across different industries will differ. Not only because the incremental results that you can deliver is different, it's also because of the business landscape in which you're operating. So that's my first question. And second,
yeah, absolutely. If I think about the banking and the financial vertical, because of the security and compliance issues, for a lot of stuff, we don't use social media that much as a lot of the other e-commerce companies might be using. So the pace of the sources of data that we can use are much more restrictive. The types of technology that we onboard mainstream are much more, it's done with caution. It's not restrictive, but it's done with much more caution in the financial services world. Whereas in e-commerce and some of the other kinds of companies, it's, you take as you see. So there is there's much less restriction. So it absolutely depends on the regulations, the restrictions, and some of that is, driven from the US, some of the stipulations and regulations that are there. So that's absolutely the case.
But I think you have to also realize that before the internet, bankers have been using big data technologies for time immemorial. They have invested more money in this industry than anyone else. And frankly, casinos and bankings are the places where you make the most money. That's where the data can, help you turn out a lot. And they have been investing a lot of money in these things.
Great. And again, every industry treats data very differently. Yeah. For some, it's direct raw material, like the e-commerce organizations. For some, it's an allied source, right? So depending on what kind of industry you are in, if it's a direct raw material like an e-commerce organization, the investment would be very, very different. The way they're going to tackle that data, do the analysis on the data is going to be very, very different.
Go ahead.
So I would also add, what the other said, I would also augment with the fact that it also depends on the mindset. Just because you're in a banking industry doesn't mean you have to be at the fag end of big data and let others because of the risk and so on. Because I come from that industry, so I understand, the mindset as well. But, like Kaushik gave an example of Amazon. When Amazon started many years back, nobody told them that, you should do a recommendation engine or, a recommendation engine will be helpful for you, but, you can wait to grow and, see how that works out. So it's a mindset. They started with that and they are industry leaders in, in some of that. Similar cases with the American Express. Also at Goldman Sachs, we invested in a platform called Marquee, which gives our end users ability to query Google-like, and then it will predict some of their portfolio outcomes depending on how the rain would be and things like that. So it augmented with that. Absolutely, it's also the how innovative you want to get.
Just to add to just two examples, and maybe we can finish. I used to run the brand server brand for HP. And we used to give ads in the paper, and it would cost you around 50 lakhs. just one page ad with call to action, and all you get 5 guys calling you for buying a server. And there's a company across the road called InMobi. I don't know, gentlemen could be here. InMobi is a mobile marketing company. What they will tell you is, based on the product profile you have, these are the 50,000 people we have profiled for you who are supposed to be the right people. They do a targeted ad. Out of 50,000, they'll tell you 30,000 didn't even read your message, they deleted it. 20,000, 10,000 went to your website, then they dropped out. 10,000 looked at your product, 5,000 bought it, 200K worth of merchandise. These are the payment gateways, these are the credit cards they use, and you paid us 20K, return on investment 20 times. And let me tell you, if I was a brand manager, I wouldn't go anywhere else. Now, should that be done by InMobi, or should I have an analytics team sitting in my office? That is one aspect. So you will see lot of established models getting shaken because there's a different way of handling it. The second example is, you don't know the banking and finance. I am sure a few years back, if I had asked any banking guy who is your competition, they will say Bank of India, Bank of Baroda, ICICI Bank. Would Paytm be a competition? And today RBI has given them a limited license to be a banker, am I right? So which means they would compete with ICICI Bank in 60% of the transactions you deal. So you also have to understand that who is your competition. It is no longer the traditional competition you thought. And hence, that's why when I started my pitch, I said, you meet customers, there is not a single guy who's saying, I don't need analytics. It is how you position it. It is tactical, it works tactically. So give a very good use case which has a very clear ROI, it works. If a guy is involved, have a blended strategy which is tactical, and the way I spoke about the R&D pitch around analytics, that's what I believe companies will do.
And my second question was around talent management in analytics. So as you mentioned, most of your talent pool is IITs or Masters in Economics and Statistics. That's where we source our talent pool from. What are the challenges, or how do you manage the right shift in the skill set after a certain point of time? So initially the focus will be on technical skills, on ability, to build the right kind of model, etc. But after a certain point of time, maybe 3 to 4 years in the organization, the requirement from a person might be very different. It may be around how he's understanding the business, how he's managing relationships, especially if you're in the service delivery mode, right? So the expectation in terms of skill sets really shifts. And how do you manage that? And how do you ensure that talent which you're getting from different schools, I mean, your initial talent, that you're able to manage and grow into an organization?
So one of the things we have been thinking about is when you hire people from IITs or any of these institutes, just fresh raw talent, the first couple of years, I think it's best to rotate people across different roles and see and get them exposed to as many business processes, as many functions as possible, as opposed to start specializing at the get-go. And then after a couple of years, if you can find out what their sweet spot is and they understand what their sweet spot, and then you try to specialize and add domain knowledge to it, I think that goes a long way, not only people more proactively choosing what they want to do, but I think from what we have seen from a retention perspective, what Pankaj was talking about, that goes a long way in alleviating some of the concerns of retention. Otherwise, what we see is people is stuck to a role, 2 years down the road, they're out in the market looking for a job because they have got a specialization. Now they're off to the next thing because they haven't rotated in other jobs. So we try to do some of that through rotation, and some of it is also upskilling the existing associates. So both approaches are something we are trying here.
So I think we are running out of time. Sure. Is there anything else? We can probably take that offline.
Thank you so much.